Well, I told you yesterday when we left you, we were going to try to find a way to, hopefully get you and keep the string going here, keep the content going. News broke probably, I'd say, somewhere now in the last 90 minutes or so. So we certainly have a topic of discussion to discuss. Kenny Pickett has a hamstring injury. Fellow OBR guy, my buddy, Pete Smith, is in here. We're going to break it all down. Some other thoughts from Browns training camp to this point, and the pads go on tomorrow. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dogtown Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Floyd. We are joined by Pete Smith, and we appreciate everybody who comes to the OBR every day for their favorite Cleveland Browns coverage. Of course, if you go to the OBR right now, Pete Smith has given you the highlights and the news of the Kenny Pickett hamstring injury. Make sure you check over for that as well. Make sure you go to the OBR, you check out the VIP package. This is the time of year you want to be getting in on this, be in on the early, get all the good stuff from training camp. Ask the insiders, of course, the wonderful musings of Lane Atkins as well. Certainly something you want to upgrade your Browns fandom with, and you can dazzle your fellow Browns fans. The OBR streaming network nightly, beginning at 6 p.m. with Browns 3D. Obviously, as you guys know now, a multitude of shows throughout the week. So make sure you're checking that out. Subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. Subscribe to the OBR, of course, over on Twitch. It's to this point, I would just say it was probably a general release. Somewhere towards the end of yesterday's practice, Kenny Pickett, something with the hamstring injury is a concern at this point. Not much details. I'm certain when everybody gets to the buildings in Berea tomorrow, when they are getting there for the anticipation of the Browns' first painted practice, there will be a flood of questions, of course, in regards to Kenny Pickett and his hamstring. What we know to this point is he will be reevaluated during the week. Certainly want to put the disclaimer out there. And I'm already seeing some things on social media. We're not sure where this is at. Look, this could be a week, maybe it could be longer. Where some people maybe want to take this conversation is probably a tad bit premature. We will certainly know tomorrow, but we're certainly going to talk about it anyway. Pete, there was nothing much, I would say, to dazzle from the quarterback play up through the three first practices. Yesterday, things seemed like they picked up a tad bit of momentum. But now, as we were trying to evaluate all of this and, with Shedeur finally getting maybe a little bit more playing time, how are you going to maybe divvy things? But, these things, as we say, have the opportunity of working themselves out. So that certainly could be the case here. Initial thoughts on, the news today from Kenny Pickett.
It works out really well for the Browns. It's super convenient. So my theory of the case was that we were going to see a ton of Kenny Pickett in OTAs in the minicamp. One, because they had no incentive to really push Joe Flacco out there, and two, the rookies weren't going to be ready to push with the ones initially. So they needed time to acclimate. So you're going to see as much as you could from Kenny Pickett, and then you would take the month break, see if any of those three young quarterbacks improved dramatically, including Pickett. They practice another week, and now Kenny Pickett, who wasn't bad by any stretch, just wasn't great, mysteriously suffers a hamstring injury in a public practice for everyone to see, in which he never showed any, at least visible, ailment. And all of a sudden, with the Browns, who need to get some clarity on the quarterback situation ahead of their joint practice on August 6th, now they're down to three quarterbacks, and the one out of the way is the one most people sort of want out of the way in Kenny Pickett. He could have certainly suffered a hamstring injury. It's not unreasonable to. I mean, that muscle is tricky. It's also a very convenient muscle to suggest got hurt, because you can sort of play it week to week if you want. In other words, if this next week, the rookies, who I guess did some good things over the past week, look really good, they may say, hey, we're going to hold out Kenny Pickett so he gets extra super healthy from the hamstring injury. If they struggle, he might get healthier and they might want to put him back out there. The added benefit, in addition to the fact that it reduces the number of quarterbacks that they're sort of actively repping to 3, is it also keeps Kenny Pickett in sort of a stasis. He's not going to get more injured than he already is. So if you're the Browns and you're trying to hold out some hope that you can trade him, or at least present yourself the opportunity to trade him, this sort of ensures that he's going to be healthy enough to be traded. If you're looking at, the Tennessee Titans, who lost Will Levis for the season, or if you're going with Jack Duffin's theory of the case that he's New Orleans, the fact of the matter is the Browns are likely going to have at least 1, if not 2 suspensions to open up the season. So it's going to be really easy for them to keep 4 quarterbacks on the roster and say those are the best 53 players they have to open the season. I don't think anyone can really argue with that. And that forces a team, whether it's the Saints, the Titans, or somebody else who might want Kenny Pickett to be a little bit more serious. Now, that could be just a conditional pick. It could be a player-for-player swap. But they can't sit there and necessarily hope that, the Browns are just going to waive Kenny Pickett and we can get him, with a waiver claim. So all of this sort of works out to the benefit of the Browns. Maybe Joe Flacco will get one more vet's day off, but I think ultimately they're pretty much done. Now, if they do get a day off, it'll be the most highly anticipated practice of the summer, because that'll just mean it's Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel going head-to-head. But this gives, one, no reason for them to really rest Joe Flacco other than if he actually needs it. They can start being more serious about preparing for the season and actually trying to win games, which, despite what anyone wants to say, that is their main focus. They want to win football games.
Of course.
But it also means that they can keep actively developing these 2 rookies. And if one of them can really surprise and really gain a head of steam and get this thing going, they're not going to sort of take that possibility away that they're going to have a shot to start, even if it's not for week 1, but at some point, because they are good enough, rather than the Browns stink and we're just throwing them out there because we want to see what they have. That evaluation is going to take the entire year to figure out, even though, the overwhelming likelihood is they're going to draft a quarterback next year.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of where I've been going with this here, on these episodes, that all this talk we're doing, certainly about, the training camp practices, and it'll certainly go on, through the joint practices. It'll certainly go on through the preseason games. This really could be a case of much ado about nothing. I mean, there is a hypothetical chance scenario where the Cleveland Browns have 1 top 5 pick, 2 top 5 picks, 2 top 10 picks. And, at that point, you're just doing your entire franchise a disservice. If this of course, that is with the fact and the notion that this quarterback class in 2026 will play out the way everyone kind of believes it'll play out. And this is, with everything that always we had been going on up until, we get the news on Kenny Pickett today, where it seemed like Kenny Pickett was first in line for a lot of things. I mean, everybody kind of knows my stance, and it just seemed more like that most of this was maybe done with the idea of propping Kenny Pickett up, because I think once Joe agreed that he would come back to Cleveland and return, automatically that was already your best veteran option, certainly on the roster. You ended up drafting the 2, so then it certainly seemed a lot more like you were going out there every day with the armor all and, the turtle wax, and you were doing everything you can to make Kenny Pickett as, shiny and clean as possible by giving him, first opportunities, and certainly these things that were leaking from the media. And, I was even getting a couple of laughs with just the way some of the coverage was worded in regards to maybe Kenny Pickett as opposed to the other quarterbacks. So now you're going to be probably in this wait and see approach as far as where this ultimately goes with Kenny Pickett. And like you said, though, Kenny, I mean, not denying there's something there, but certainly now it's not something where he's in a walking boot, or Kenny Pickett is out there, on a scooter, or he's got a crutch with him, you know what I'm saying, aiding, he'll be able to walk around the field, participate in practice from that standpoint. And, with the ultimate goal of, maybe and hopefully for the Browns, this becomes a case where, Joe will be the, leader of the pack. and you feel that one of these two rookie quarterbacks is hopefully ready to at least graduate into number two. But bringing up the rookie quarterbacks to this point, and certainly things will pick up some more pace this week where these guys are just going to get more opportunities because now we're going from a cut of 4, certainly to a cut of 3. Early impressions, Pete. Shedeur Sanders, Dillon Gabriel.
Man, both have made a decent number of nice throws throughout practice, but neither one is jumping out at me and saying, I'm going to be your starting quarterback right now. I think part of that is a function of the defensive line is just killing people. And hopefully pads will help equalize that a little bit. Offensive linemen will get decidedly better when they have access to the pads, which starts on Monday.
Put the armor on, absolutely.
But I mean, I just think they've got a long way to go to really make a statement other than, yes, you can piece together a few really nice throws and do some good things. And I think you're going to get some, basically extensions of their collegiate career, just albeit against much better competition. I mean, Dillon Gabriel, he's a guy with all the answers, seemingly. Can that continue? Is his height going to be an issue? So far, it hasn't been, seemingly, especially in what is sort of an unrealistic camp setup, in that because defensive linemen don't have pads on, they are often putting their hands up, and Gabriel seems to be able to find passing windows. Meanwhile, I still see Shedeur Sanders take sacks he shouldn't take. I still see confusion on that end, but he also throws an incredibly nice ball and has just an array of passes he can make, which are going to translate. Now, it seems like those two quarterbacks made the most of the month that they had in terms of just mastering the offense and being able to do more, which is why you're starting to see them get more time against better competition, which is exactly what you want. But how far can that go? Are we going to start seeing them really move the ball when it matters against, and it's going to be difficult to tell, honestly, just because the defense is really good. And the Browns offense has a number of question marks, not least of which is quarterback, but I mean, Jerry Jeudy's great. David Njoku should be obviously a really good tight end. And then after that, there's a lot of guys that we hope can be good or can build on what they've done in the past, but not a whole lot of answers. And are some of the other players that maybe we are hoping can, earn roles like Dylan Sampson, who I think is going to be more than just a running back. I think he's going to do a whole variety of things, and Harold Fannin, what's that going to look like, and those type of things. But we may not get a real indication until the first joint practice against the Carolina Panthers as far as what this is really going to look like, just because the Browns defense might give you a false sense of just how bleak it is, given what they've shown so far.
Now, there's so much obviously discussion right now, of the first 4 practices which weren't padded, and then of course tomorrow business about to pick up, so to speak, as you would say, with the pads going on. For some of these drills, for the length of time in college that both Shedeur and Dillon Gabriel played, they should have kind of 7 and 7s, things like that. They should have kind of looked good here, though. The one thing I want to ask you, how much from the quarterback position alone, and obviously this is going to be affected about what offensive line can do versus defensive line, these types of things, but what is with this change here, with the pads going on, how much of a difference does that make, essentially, Pete, in your opinion, to the quarterback position?
I mean, they're obviously not going to hit the quarterback and put him on the ground, but it's going to look more like real football. Pads popping, real blocks, a running game that looks like a running game. Like, those things are going to change things up, as opposed to their, I think, sort of creative answer to how to help their 7-on-7 thing by having offensive linemen go against offensive linemen to sort of simulate a pass rush thing. You're going to get something that looks more realistic. You're going to get, the whistle at times when there's sacks, as opposed to, and I don't have a problem with this because the Browns defensive line is so dominant, to have Myles Garrett essentially tap off, but keep the quarterback still going. So he's still working through his reads and stuff like that. But you're going to get a little bit more that's more real to the game of football. And, the other part of that is going to be, what are your receivers really going to be able to do? Especially if you are a guy like Luke Florier, who's 5'8", 179 pounds. The Browns defense is big. How is that going to affect his ability to do what he does, find holes in the defense and some of those things? Is that going to shrink some of those windows? Is the physicality going to make it more challenging for those guys to create separation? So that's the other element of it. Is it not only is the pass rush and some of those things going to be real, more game-like, but the coverage is going to be more realistic, more physical. There's going to be more contact in that element, and receivers are going to have to earn it more in a way that they haven't to this point. Like every year we will see, sort of the water bug guy in some camp is absolutely crushing it, and everybody thinks they're going to be, oh, this is going to be a great fantasy player or whatever, and then the pads come on and they sort of disappear, or it takes them a while to sort of really make that adjustment. So we'll see if that takes its toll. Again, the Browns have a lot of – Martin Emerson is a huge human being. Like he's going to be awful in some scenarios where he's trying to go against a super small guy because he can't really use his strength and everything else. Now he can really press in a way that's going to make it more impactful and hopefully make him better. That's also going to make those receivers have to work more.
Yeah, no question. And look, I envision there could be a scenario where basically Myles Garrett's going to be told, look, you just go take a knee because we can't get anything done here, man. All right. Like, you've gotten your W's, you've gotten your wins, we're good, but this might work a little bit better for the offense if you're just not even anywhere near the field with your helmet in your hand. You've been bringing up the running back position, and, certainly, don't want to get into the details involving Quinshon Judkins, but let's get into the details currently with the Cleveland Browns running back room. I think with the Browns drafting both Judkins and Sampkins, I'm sorry, yes, Judkins and Sampson, I think a lot of people, automatically were just very quick to poo-poo Jerome Ford and kind of some of the things that Jerome Ford was able to do here over the last couple of years. And I do want to get to Dillon Sampson in this regard because, we've seen and we saw early on in the offset, with rookie camp and then, of course, in OTAs that, you saw that they were trying to, and maybe, Nyheim Hines, what that role was maybe going to be besides running the football and, maybe trying to get Dillon Sampson to do that. Do you think Judkins' unavailability, does that maybe put a hamper on some of the things you were hoping you could do with Dillon Sampson as opposed to just playing running back?
I've sort of gone back and forth on this. I mean, there's a scenario where it could, because especially without Ford as well, at least right now, I could see where he's their best option and they just want to get him as many reps as possible, or the best sort of offense on the field as possible. But then again, they've got other guys. If they want to use, Sampson and another running back on the field, they can easily do that and then put Sampson in the slot or a jet player or some of those other things, because I think there's a real scenario where that can be a good opportunity for the Browns, because you're not going to ask Sampson at 5'8", 200 pounds to do much in pass pro anyway. So don't pretend. If you want to, and if he's one of your best options, which is where it sort of makes him potentially a threat against obviously they do different things. They're not going to win the same way, but he might be a threat to sort of those pure slot receiver types, because if you can line him up in the slot and either, whether it's a quick pass or something, and he, as opposed to having to beat a whole defense, which he did as the SEC Offensive Player of the Year this past year, if he only has to beat one or two guys and create an explosive play, then that's a great situation for the Browns, and that becomes a way to get what was Tennessee's best player on offense to be the Browns' fourth or fifth most threatening, and then create more of a problem for the defense. So much of this really comes down to how much can Dillon Sampson absorb? How much is he ready to take on? And that may ultimately answer that question. But, the Browns signed a UFL running back. They had the undrafted rookie that they brought in initially. And hopefully Jerome Ford's going to come back shortly. But if they feel like none of those guys are giving them enough, there may be a situation where Sampson is sort of forced to be just a running back, at least initially. But I'm hoping that they are still going to find ways to explore those other opportunities, because I think that always made more sense rather than just being a rotational guy behind, Judkins in a scenario where he wasn't suspended.
Yeah, but I mean, and I agree with you. And I also think the Browns really right now, till they get any type of clarity on Quinshon Judkins and if he may ever join this team, with Jerome Ford, and there is no obviously contract with Cleveland after the season. So if they basically say, all right, well, Jerome Ford's going to be our lead back and we're just going to feed him because this is the situation we're currently in, because, we want to work on what is going to be the future of this offense and certainly not hamstring a guy like Dillon Sampson, because Sampson is interesting in the fact that at 5'8", 200, he's put together. He's got a nice build, because I think everybody, oh, well, he's 5'8", but he's two bills. But I also think there's that part of he can kind of get lost every now and then at 5'8", but still physically able, and so you can find your unique and creative ways certainly to get him involved, get the ball into his hands. And I think if that was your original plan for it, yes, the Browns want to try to win. That is the goal here going out. I mean, nobody goes into week one with the tank theory. It just doesn't happen. You play to be competitive, to win, until you realize that the situation in the season is just not going the way you think it's going to go. I do want to get to the wide receiver position. And, you mentioned this as well, because it's going to be a whole different ball game for Jerry Jeudy this year, because teams are going to do everything they can to take Jerry Jeudy away, and other guys are going to have to contribute. Was that 3-week stretch last year of Cedric Tillman, and even still, he doesn't have to average 7 for 95 and a touchdown for a 3-week stretch. Even if he could come maybe in the ballpark of those numbers, that is certainly a help. Deontay Johnson, the early returns are good, but as we know with Deontay, it's a personal thing. It's a mental thing, whether he's 100% bought in. There's no meter for that. There's no barometer for that. There's no film to watch on that. And there's certainly been people here in Cleveland over the years, where we said, hey, all right, here's an opportunity with this guy, but you can understand by the time you wake up the next morning, something changed, and all of a sudden that guy's no longer with the team. Looking at what is in that room, besides those three, I mean, everybody has very high hopes and wants to think that Jamari Thrash can be a contributor. I'm not going to say he can or he can't be. I'm not here to do that, but we are talking about a guy that was selected in the 5th round. I'm to the point where I think I'm floating the idea that 2 wide receivers who are most likely going to be on the Browns 53-man roster going into week 1 probably are not even in Cleveland yet.
It's possible. I mean, they should be super active on the waiver wire at a couple of positions if they don't get what they want. Wide receiver makes a lot of sense. In general, Jerry Jeudy, I don't have a lot of reason to doubt he can't be as good as he was last year. I thought I've continued to think that he was better than even initially thought last year. And if David Njoku is healthy, which is big if people can stay off his legs, he's going to help. If those guys are taking a ton of attention, it's going to give more space for other guys. Cedric Tillman certainly would benefit from that scenario. Harold Fannin would benefit from that scenario. If they use Sampson in the way I imagine, that could be another outlet to sort of take some pressure off. But I simultaneously also wonder if they go from a situation where last year Jerry Jeudy was productive even when none of those other guys were around. So if he can maintain that, then he's going to create opportunities for everybody else. And it's going to allow somebody to potentially shine. It's just a question of, 1, can they stay healthy? And 2, can they deliver on that? Cedric Tillman, I don't have much reason to believe he can't be an effective X, at least to the level that we've seen. Whether that's going to ever amount to 1,000 yards in a season, I don't know. But I still think he could be a productive player. David Njoku can be great. I don't know what to make of Jamari Thrash on this just because I haven't seen enough. And then you get into sort of the many undrafted guys that they sort of collected. I think at best, you're going to get 1 on the active roster and maybe 2 more on the practice squad. But then, you're sort of leaving it on the open, and then you're using other positions, namely, in this case, Harold Fannin, potentially Dillon Sampson, some of these other positions to sort of supplement the wide receiver position. And instead of just begging that to be productive, if it's not going to be there, to get it from positions that you have more talent, more options, more weaponry.
Yeah, and it might be one of those ones where, you know what, yes, this was the personnel group that was on the field, 12, 11, et cetera, et cetera. But let's maybe take a little bit more of a look at how everybody was lined up and see whether or not, the personnel grouping, really played out as the personnel grouping. There is certainly one other position, and it's certainly it was a hot topic right around the draft with the selection. Then after with the announcement that JOK is going to miss 2025, 2 days into camp, Jordan Hicks decides that he gave it a run from the spring, and there's just times where you're 50-50, and you think maybe if you get back into the building and you start doing maybe some football things again, that's gonna get you through it. For Hicks, obviously just not the case. He just felt that it was just the time. And look, 10 years in the NFL, you don't question somebody if they say that's the time, that's the time. But you did mention earlier that there is a really good possibility that there are going to be two Cleveland Browns that are going to begin this season, most likely facing suspensions. I'm assuming you were putting a linebacker in there as well, and that would, of course, be Devin Bush. So this was a room, after the selection of Carson Schlesinger, I think we all kind of felt that maybe was telling us what was going to go on with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. But all of a sudden, that room that kind of looked bountiful and deep, where I'm kind of comparing it kind of seems like a little bit more like the early Andrew Berry days of the Cleveland Browns at the linebacker room, where it was just give me some guys that I know can get on the field, take some snaps. And those groups, to be fair, and I know we talked about it back in those days, is the Browns were getting more than essentially at that time they were putting into the linebacker room.
Yeah, I like the linebacker room, and honestly, if not for the stupid contract they gave Devin Bush, I'd cut him.
Yep. It was a
Even with
1.7 guaranteed. I think it's 1.7 guaranteed.
no,
Yeah.
he got 3 point. They gave him 3.25
Oh, that's
million
right.
right off
That's
the
right.
rip.
That's right. That's right.
3.25 million right off the rip, which is why you can't.
That should have been the one that indicated to us what exactly was going to be going on with JOK.
So I like the linebacker room as it stands, even if I was to get rid of Devin Bush and without JOK and without Jordan Hicks. Certainly, the Jordan Hicks thing is a big loss because he was their best linebacker outside of JOK last year. Even at his age, he just understands the position, plays at a high level. The only thing that sort of held him back was
highly intelligent linebacker. Yes.
If not for his body letting him down, he could have easily played till he's 40 and been good every year. That part of it is unfortunate. And from that standpoint, it's sort of, you went from Jordan Hicks is going to be your Mike and Schlesinger is probably going to be the Will to now Schlesinger is going to be the Mike. I don't see any scenario where that doesn't happen. And you got an early hint even before Jordan Hicks retired. They had already put the green dot on Schlesinger, and maybe that was just an experiment to see just how much he could handle. But I think at this point, they're just going to put it on him and say, you're going to figure this out. And that's a big ask because Jim Schwartz, it takes a lot for him to trust. Even Jordan Hicks, got reamed out in practice when he didn't agree with his diagnosis of a particular situation and the call he made. But this is what Schlesinger was brought here to be. It was even with Jordan Hicks, it was eventually going to be Schlesinger as the Mike. And then by virtue of Schlesinger moving inside like that, or to the Mike, that you're going to now open up the Will, which, on one hand, if you were somebody sitting going, oh man, I'm really excited for Jerome Baker, suddenly he becomes infinitely more viable as a player. And then the other guy who I think the Browns are quietly rooting for is Mahmoud Diabate, because he has the athletic traits that you want to be a linebacker in this system. Jim Schwartz likes speed and range and all these other things. Diabate has sort of played variety of roles dating back to college, and it was about finding him a home. So he's been inconsistent, but he played a ton of football last year. He's only 24. He's in the last year of his contract as one of those undrafted free agents, along with Ronnie Hickman. If they can get enough out of him, I think they want to roll with both him and Schlesinger. And obviously, their best scenario would be JOK comes back next year and he ultimately takes the Will. But failing that, that if Schlesinger can own the Mike role, I think that will be fine, even if it has some bumps along the way. And then Diabate can become the long-term Will with a with what would be a new contract. The Browns have their linebacker, future sort of situated really nicely for them going forward, and they've still got other guys. They've still got, Buki Watson, whatever that's going to manifest itself, if he's going to be the Sam or whatever else they're going to get out of the group. They've got an undrafted free agent whose name escapes me at this moment. They've got more bodies than you think. Like in all, they've got 7 guys in that room. So I'm not worried about it. I don't sit there clamoring for another veteran presence. Maybe the Browns will bring in somebody, but in that sense, Jerome Baker is a veteran. He's 28. And hell, Tony Grossi was asking about retiring for some reason. They've got enough guys in there. Jason Tarver has been arguably the best assistant coach in terms of player development on this team for the reasons you mentioned.
Sure.
He's gotten really good play out of some suspect groups. I mean, the end of the 2022 season, after JOK went down with a foot injury and they had a rash of other injuries, the Browns beat the Ravens and the Washington Commanders with the likes of Reggie Ragland and Jermaine Carter, and some of these other guys who were just street free agents, and they got decent amount of play to the point where like people were disappointed when the Browns didn't bring back Ragland the next year, just because he was able to record something like 10 tackles or something in one of those games.
I think it was Christmas Eve in the freezing cold. Remember, he was just out there busting.
They beat the Ravens like 13-3, and then they beat Washington like 24-10 when with Deshaun Watson playing terribly. So I think they're going to bet on Tarver. They've bet on Tarver over and over and over again. I think they're just going to lean into that. And maybe there's a world where Hicks is sort of like, he's retired, but he's trying to stick around and help out. I don't know the ins and outs of that element, but he could. And just say, look, man, you're the 33rd pick in the draft. Really smart, in addition to being physically everything a team would want in an off-ball linebacker. And we're just going to make it work. With this defensive line in front of him, which could be the best thing for him, that there's every reason to believe that the top 2 picks for the Browns are going to be major players right from week 1.
Well, and the thing with Schlesinger, and this is kind of where I'm at, look, there could be some struggles early, and it would certainly be understandable. But, with him and the fact that there was really only 1 year of legitimate playing of defense, he was pretty much a special teamer his first 2 years out in Westwood, that, eventually once Schlesinger gets himself acclimated to NFL life, there's certainly an opportunity that there's going to be another spike within his game, which I think there truly is that chance, with all the athleticism, with the tackling ability, and then just the confidence of, I'm here now, I am worthy of this, I am capable of this. And, certainly him and Graham working, one behind the other, working in unison, there is a chance, obviously, for those 2 top picks to really, really work out well. Main storyline, obviously, of the day, no, the Cleveland Browns were not active. There was no practice today. But news did drop somewhere around 4 o'clock Eastern. Kenny Pickett, to what we know to this point right now, is dealing with a hamstring issue. We know was not deemed out, was deemed that he will be evaluated during the week. So the assumption certainly would be the Browns, I believe it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are the practices. My guess would be the earliest you would maybe see would be Friday, because I don't think you're going to push him anywhere with a day off anyway. Try to give him this rest. We'll see if it's, truly an issue where, by that me saying it's an issue where we're talking, multiple weeks. If it's just something where, something, came up and grabbed him, whatever, and that's the way the hamstring can work sometimes. Maybe it is something where he's maybe ready to participate when they do get down to Carolina for joint practices. But for all of those that were hoping for more of an opportunity for the rookie quarterbacks, there's not really a reason now the Browns can't give that to them. Yes, Joe Flacco can maybe take some more reps, but the way it's looking now, there's no reason to be pushing your 40-year-old QB1 that heavy before September. So that is basically where we are at. That is the main point of today. Pete does have an article, of course, on the Kenny Pickett injury up on the OBR. Make sure you're checking that out. Make sure you're checking out the OBR.com daily for your favorite Cleveland Browns written coverage from, of course, Pete, of course, Jacob Rose, of course, Jack Duff, and of course, Fred. The wonderful Newswire every morning from Barry McBride, all of these things. And if you like all that, there's an opportunity certainly for more. Check in for the VIP package, of course. A lot more info is put out through there. Look more intelligent in front of your Browns friends. And then when they beat you up and bother you and wonder where you're getting that information, you can suggest the VIP package on to them as well. The OBR streaming network beginning every night at 6 p.m. Eastern, beginning with Browns 3D, various shows throughout the week, as everybody knows. Make sure for Pete and Brad on Tuesday night, you check out the React. That show usually just absolutely kills because Brad finds the perfect things to set Pete up to be the absolute best version of Pete Smith there is. Of course, all that being said, this has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.